Hey everybody, welcome to our Tuesday night webinar. How's everybody doing tonight? Hi Barb, and Dolores, welcome. Hi Linda, glad you could join us tonight. Gloria, Sonia, Brenda, Lewis, wonderful. Thanks guys. It's a pretty nice hot day in Red Deer today. We've got some pretty windy days though. So tonight's topic is going to be how we create disease. What is something that most of us are doing every day that is contributing to disease? And how do we prevent that? I think the more you understand this topic, the more you really grasp it, the healthier your days ahead are going to be. Because according to the information that I've read and the success that I've had over the last 28 years, and the success that's been happening in this industry, this information could possibly prevent close to 90 to 95% of disease. Now, the information is one thing to hear and to understand. To make the lifestyle changes for it, that's where the hard part is. So the format tonight is going to be very similar to normal. I've got a presentation that I want to share with everybody. As I work through this presentation, I will probably likely not be answering any questions or comments or anything. I'm going to focus on trying to stay on time and on track for those that have other things to do tonight. And at the end of the presentation, I will go back and I'll answer any of the questions that are asked. So when you're asking a question during the presentation, please make sure you're clear on what you're referencing so that when I go back at the end of the presentation, I can clearly understand the question and be able to answer it. We've got some fun offers and some fun things that we're going to do tonight. So thank you for being on the live call. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Give a couple seconds in case anybody has questions. And then we're going to get started here right away. There's a lot of information for me to cover tonight. And it's such an in-depth topic that I'm going to try to do it justice, I guess, without going too much overtime. All right. Everybody should be good. I don't see any questions being asked. So I'm just going to share my screen. Your gut, your health. Question in the direction of modern medicine or modern healthcare. All right. Without further ado, let's dive into tonight's topic. So, do you know that modern medicine has listed over 100,000 different diseases? And honestly, that's one of the lower numbers that I've found. Some of them list millions, others list 250,000. One of the lowest numbers I found on Wikipedia was 100,000 different diseases. Do you really feel that we have 100,000 different diseases? Or what if these are actually 100,000 symptoms of a bigger problem that is universally present in every one of these so-called diseases? See, pharmacists working for the drug companies love to come up with new disease names. The more disease names, the more drugs they can patent for that disease, and the more profitable and that they can sell. So they look at every little symptom that you have, and they'll compile one or two of those together and give it a disease name. Then they'll compile a different couple symptoms together and give it a disease name. How many of these 100,000 different diseases do you think modern medicine has cured? Anybody? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Half of them, 50,000, 75,000, 10,000. What are we thinking? With all the billions of dollars that the pharmaceutical industry is profiting every year, and the modern medicine and the advancements in understanding biology of the human body, you would think that we've got to have done a really good job at knocking out a very large portion of these, right? One would hope so. If not, then why are we going in this direction? So there's a bunch of zeros on there. According to the World Health Organization, when you look it up, they claim polio and smallpox have been cured in the last 50 years. That's two diseases that they're excited about that they've cured. So 100,000 different listed diseases, and we can cure two of them. But wait a second, can we actually cure smallpox and polio? Because smallpox and polio are still around today. If you look up how many cases of smallpox or polio are in Canada or even in the province you live in, I guarantee you it's not going to be zero. So wouldn't that mean that we're more controlling two diseases? But have we actually cured any disease? So then I'd throw this question out to you. How many different diseases do you think the human body is capable of curing? I would say all of them. Because every time I try to find a disease, or I think I found a disease that the human body just can't come back from, somebody does it. Somebody shows that it is absolutely plausible and functionally possible for the human body to cure this incurable disease. Those that don't know my backstory, in 1996, my mother was diagnosed with an incurable disease, a terminal case of lupus, and she was given about 2 weeks to live. With 2 weeks to live, there was no hope. There was no treatment. There was no medication. Dialysis wasn't an option. There was no options. It was go home and die. And yet she beat it. Understanding the information you're going to hear tonight, she turned her entire state of health around and turned her body into a disease-fighting machine. And that body became so healthy that it completely destroyed terminal lupus in her body. And in 8 months, she was back to work, 100% healthy, both kidneys functioning at 100%, feeling amazing. So we're going to use this illustration tonight to kind of show you a process that happens many times every day and how we are messing it up and how we are abusing this process. And this is how we are creating disease. But first, have we thought about all this disease? Like, where does disease come from? What causes these diseases? Or are they just random? Every morning when we wake up, do we roll the dice? And the person that gets double sixes gets a disease? Or the lowest number gets the disease? Because it sounds stupid. It really does every time I say that. But you'd be amazed at how many people abuse their bodies day in, day out, and then they get sick. And you know what their first question is? Why me? Why am I sick? You know, if we abuse our cars every single day and then they break down, do we sit there and say, man, this was a crappy car. I shouldn't have bought this car, when we're the ones that abused it every day, pushing it to its absolute breaking point? It's not random. In fact, almost all disease comes from one common origin. There's this study, People's Hospital in New York stated that after a 25-year study of 5,000 people, just so you guys know, 25 years and over 5,000 cases is like a gold standard study. You've got a very long period of time and a very large group of people to study. They had this to say: every physician should realize that bowel toxemia is the most important and primary contributing cause of many disorders of the human body. Dr. Broker then in 1928 went as far to say, it is now universally conceded that autointoxication is the underlying cause of an exceptionally large group of symptom complexes. Do you know what symptom complex is another word for? Diseases. Groups of symptoms given a title called a disease. So what Dr. Broker is saying is, every doctor, every professional in his association believes and confirms that bowel toxemia, the toxins coming from our own intestinal system, is the underlying cause of an exceptionally large group of diseases. Exceptionally large group. And then he goes on to say intestinal toxemia is a process resulting from a certain type of lifestyle. Because it's not just a diet. We create disease by the way we eat, think, play, and live. The entire lifestyle we choose to have. If we eat good food, but we never move our bodies and we lay in bed all day, that doesn't create health. Diseases are symptoms. This is back to that question that I posed in the very beginning. Are these 100,000 different diseases truly diseases, or are they symptoms? Here's a good little expert from a book. Scientists working for pharmaceutical companies dream up names of new diseases and list of symptoms every day of the year. This in no way means there are millions of diseases, only that they can now patent a chemical to be marketed as a cure for that targeted disease. That is until people are harmed or killed by this drug and it's forcefully taken off the public market. The key phrase that I want to draw attention to in this is scientists working for pharmaceutical companies dream up names for new diseases. So these diseases aren't posed by Health Canada or by our doctors or our pharmacists. They're posed by pharmaceutical companies hiring scientists to find groups of symptoms that they can market a drug for so that they can patent that drug and sell it for that disease. And for reference, if anybody wants to read this book, I think it's a really good read, Never Fear Cancer Again by Raymond Francis. That's where that expert is taken from. Excerpt. So all 100,000 diseases start right here, in our mouth. We voluntarily put food into our mouth and swallow it 3, 4, 5 or more times per day. Nobody holds a gun to our head and tells us to drink that cup of coffee or eat a cheeseburger or else, or have those French fries or eat that processed food, whatever it is. We do that voluntarily, and we do it because we're addicted to food. And if I can just be as blunt as that, you, I, most people on this webinar tonight are addicted to cooked, processed foods. That doesn't mean that we are horrible people. It means that we have trusted a food industry to produce quality food, and their goal wasn't to produce quality food, it was to produce addictive foods. See, they've spent billions of dollars on figuring out the right texture and the right mesh rates of sugars and fats and salts to make our taste buds go absolutely haywire and addicted to these foods. An analogy I often like to give you guys is, imagine you buy this brand new car. You spent every extra dollar you had on it. It's your dream car, right? You love this car. You clean it daily. And you stop by the local gas station and they're offering a brand new cheap kind of gas. And you fill your tank with this cheap gas. And now this dream car can barely go 50 kilometers an hour. It is stalling at every intersection, is blowing black smoke, backfiring, and riding as rough as can be. Would you ever take that car, that beloved, perfect, amazing, wonderful car, back to that same gas station and buy that same gas again? No, you wouldn't, no matter how cheap it was, because you saw how poorly that car ran on it. Now think about your body, the only body you get, the body that brings you all the pleasure, all the joy, and allows you to experience life in whatever way you want. When you put fuel inside of it that makes you burp, fart, fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon, can't concentrate, can't think clearly, and are degenerating at an accelerated rate, why in the world would you and I go back and put that same fuel into our bodies the next day? Because we're addicted to it. That's the only explanation that I can rationally think. If we're not addicted to that food, then what is wrong with us? Why are we putting the worst fuel possible into the most important vehicle that we have, which is our bodies? And then sit there every day and complain that we wish we had more energy. We wish we could think clearer. We wish our memory worked better. We wish. Well, all of those things I'm going to tell you right now are available to you if you're willing to change the fuel that you run on. All right, let's get back to my presentation. So, how many times should we chew our food? 3 times, 10 times, 50 times? Sometimes people say 150 times. Well, The answer really is depends on the food that you're eating. If you're consuming a smoothie, you probably don't need to chew it very much at all. But if you're consuming steak and potatoes, you should definitely chew that substantially. The idea here is you should chew it until it is a mush or semi-solid in your mouth. If there's still solid chunks of food, you haven't chewed it enough. So think of that. Let's use an analogy. All of you guys on the webinar, you guys do really good. You guys are awesome chewers. Me, on this side of the camera, I'm a horrible chewer. Like 1-2 chews down my throat. Sometimes it like stretches my throat and I have to drink water just to get it to pit down. Watch what happens as we go through this. Mike Adam had this to say. Today, of more than 95% of all chronic diseases caused by poor food choice, toxic food ingredients, nutritional deficiencies, and the lack of exercise. Would you guys agree with this statement? Because if you do, then I can tell you the cure for 95% of disease is better food choices, removing toxic food ingredients, restoring nutritional deficiencies, and improving physical exercise. If this is true, 95% of the diseases are caused by these, then the opposite has to be true. 95% of the cure is also in those, by changing those. So we swallowed this food. You guys did really well. I didn't. And it enters this enzymatic portion of the stomach, the top portion of our stomach. Because we continue to consume foods deficient in enzymes, you and I both, the good chewer and the bad chewer, are experiencing levels of indigestion never seen before in the human race. If you look back at like grandma and grandpa's generation or previous to that, all of them were eating out of their own lands. They didn't have mass supermarket and commercialization of our food supply. And so they had to eat rich enzymes, and they were getting proper digestion. And I think that's why a lot of diseases took 70 or 80 years to manifest in these people. Here's something we need to grasp if we're going to understand the following slides coming up. First of all, protein is a macronutrient, and it's absolutely important. The myth or the misconception is that protein means meat, and that is false. Protein is a type of nutrient. It can be found in plants and animal products such as meat, but your nuts and seeds and lots of vegetables also contain proteins, some of them in greater quality and quantity than your meat sources. But the meat industry has done a really good job on programming our brains to associate protein with meat. But your body doesn't really care about protein. Now, I'm just going to turn off this slide for a second. Let's use, what's a good one here? Let's use this bottle right here. This little circumference is your cell wall. If you're going to absorb a protein, it's got to fit through that circumference. You guys following? This is more in relationship to what a protein looks like. Both hands binded together. This is no way going to fit through that little hole. So the first thing that has to happen is we have to break the protein down into peptides. Separate my hands. Now I've got 2 peptides. Together they make a protein. Separate, they're called peptides. This is still way too big to fit through that circumference. So the body still has not been able to use this. Protein means nothing. Peptides mean nothing unless we can break it down into individual single amino acids. This is what's called the polypeptide conversion, where my fingers would essentially represent like an amino acid, and you'd break down the bonds of each one so that they were loose. Now each finger can fit through that space, and that's where we generate value from. Get back control here, there we are. So proteins into peptides into amino acids. So your body only cares about amino acids. That is what it can absorb, that's what it can uptake. We need proteins to get the amino acids, but we need to understand that there's more important things than protein. A protein that you can't break down or digest into an amino acid is almost worthless for you. In fact, it's worse than worthless. It is poisonous for you. And the following slides, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. This is happening in that portion of your stomach. It's breaking down the proteins into peptides into amino acids. And this is all happening while we liquefy our foods. While that is happening, the cardiac portion of your stomach is filling up with acid. And so the few of these acids are pepsinogen and hydrochloric acid. How many of you people were brought up to believe that hydrochloric acid digested your food? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you were. Because a lot of nutritionalists and naturopathic doctors that I still talk to were brought up that way. Their schooling taught them that hydrochloric acid was a digesting food acid and it was used to digest your food. And in fact, that's wrong. Hydrochloric acid does not digest your food. Here's some things that hydrochloric acid does. First of all, it converts pepsinogen into pepsin. So it converts an acid into an enzyme. And pepsin is an enzyme that helps break down proteins. So it starts that polypeptide conversion. So that is important. Hydrochloric acid is needed for this process, but the hydrochloric acid itself is not an enzyme and does not break down your food. So drinking hydrochloric acid is not a good thing, in my opinion, because the upper curve of your stomach and your esophagus is never designed to handle that kind of harsh acidity. Like hydrochloric acid is a 2.0 on the acidity scale. That's about as acidic as things get. Something else it does is it alkalizes the blood. And it alkalizes the blood because it pulls hydrogen and chloride out of the bloodstream to make hydrochloric acid. One of the most important things that hydrochloric acid does is it cleanses the food of viruses, bacteria, and funguses. So back to my hands. I'm going to use my hands quite a bit here because I'm a kind of a visual hand talker. Remember how you guys chewed your food really well? So you got the stomach full of liquid in here, and your food was digested into almost a liquid, and then the upper curve of the stomach with the enzymes liquefied it. So now these two liquids mix together, and you get this complete solution. So the hydrochloric acid runs through all that liquid, and it kills any of the bacteria, any viruses or funguses or parasites that are present in that food. But what about me? I've got this like semi-chewed food that's still like almost a solid. Can hydrochloric acid run through that? Absolutely not. It runs over it. What about all the bacteria and parasites and funguses and viruses that are inside of that piece of meat or the undigested plant or food or whatever it was that I didn't chew properly? That gets a free pass into your intestinal system. It's like a Trojan horse, the biblical story of the Trojan horse where they fill this gift full of soldiers, and the enemy brings it in past the gates and past all the defenses into the city. That's basically what we're doing when we're not chewing our food properly or digesting our food properly, is we are giving a free pass to parasites, bacteria, viruses, and funguses, and all kinds of microbials directly into our intestinal system. Because that hydrochloric acid that was there as the defense was totally skipped over because of that level of indigestion. And the last did you know here is just that many people believe hydrochloric acid, right, does not. I'm much more in favor of helping the body produce proper levels of hydrochloric acid than I am in anybody internally taking it, especially orally. And if you're going to take it orally, make sure it is in like an enteric special coated capsules so you're not damaging. But I don't even think you need to do that. So let's look at this first little bit coming off the stomach. So if I just back up here for a second, see how that is the very tail of the stomach, called the duodenum or the duodenum. Close to 90% of the amino acids, vitamins, and minerals, including the fat-soluble ones, are absorbed in the first 12 inches of your small intestine. Do you see how important it is to have this food digested, liquefied, and ready to be absorbed? Because 90% of it happens right away. If you're not properly digested your food, there's a potential you could lose up to 90% of absorption. To me, that is shocking. 90% of the value of my food can disappear if I don't have enzymes and if I didn't chew it properly. How many of you are not chewing your food into complete mush and eating enzyme deficient food? You don't need to tell me, because you know that you're in this position where you're potentially losing 90% of the value of that food is totally being bypassed in major nutrient receptor sites. In fact, let's follow this whole journey. This small intestine looks like this. See, the average intestine is 6 meters long compared to the large intestine that's only 1.5 meters long. And the bacteria in your intestines outnumber your cells in your body by a minimum of 3 to 1. It is now often believed to be more than 10 times. So let's look at this first example. See, this is like a cut into your small intestine. See all these little ribs? That works perfectly if your food is liquefied. Let's go back to this. So these little ribs, liquid comes in, would fill up all those little ribs, and all of that surface area is absorbable tissue. But what about me with that undigested chunk of food? What's going to happen there? You think I'm getting much absorption? No. What if we even pictured this with me? This like chunky food. Let's go to like America's #1 bought-in food, pizza. The dairy forming mucus and the cheese and then the flour. You guys ever make flour or bread? You know, flour and water stick together, makes this like slimy glue-like adhesive. You add in a little bit of bad bacteria like yeast in there, and you've got like a total time bomb. Imagine filling up each one of these little ribs with bread and cheese. Do you see the picture that I'm starting to see? I would see this or this ribs completely caked, covered, and coated in bread and cheese. Now, what do you think the sensible thing is? Somebody has a piece of pizza. The next morning, they eat a super high fiber breakfast and a fiber lunch and a fiber dinner, and all that extra fiber are scraping all that stuff off before it gets to stay there very long, right? Does that really happen? Because what I witness is people order extra pizzas, 2-for-1s, extra large sizes, not because they're going to eat all that pizza that night, but because they enjoy cold pizza just as much for breakfast as they do the night before dinner. Now, not all of us are cold pizza lovers, but there are a lot of us. But what do we have for the next morning? Peanut butter and jam sandwich or toast, bread of some kind, maybe a croissant, pastries, muffins, right? Back to this like flour, gluey, adhesive stuff, day after day, meal after meal. You can imagine what's happening there. This is what each one of those ribs are covered in. See these millions of little villi? This is what runs through your liquid and absorbs all of the vitamins, the amino acids, the fats, the sugars, the minerals, and nutrients. How do you do that when this is all caked and covered in cheese and flour and undigested foods and chemicals from our food supply that are so toxic and damaging? You guys familiar with Roundup or glyphosate? It's a herbicide sprayed on almost every wheat crop in North America. It's in the organic wheat, even though they don't spray it. It's coming from the soils. It's coming from cross-contamination. You can test organic breads, and you'll find the glyphosate still present inside of there. And one of the environmental watch groups associated with health officials deemed that 0.1 parts per billion is likely problematic for the human species. And yet in like Honey Nut Cheerios, we're seeing over 1,000 parts per billion of glyphosate. What we see is glyphosate damages these villi. See how they're all like full and they're standing straight up and they're ready to absorb? If you were to look at a villi as somebody that's gluten intolerant or celiac, this tissue is all so inflamed. I'm just going to jump here. If this is what like the healthy ridges look like, when you get all inflamed, it swells almost like this. So now you've lost 90% or so of the surface area that you can absorb nutrition from. Not only that, but the villi that are up here, instead of this, start to look like this. They're curled over, they're slumping, they're laying against the intestines. Instead of standing up to absorb, they're doing this. Do you guys understand the ramifications this is having? And if not, I'm going to go into it. And if you do, well, stay along for the ride. Maybe you'll learn something else. Because here's a more important aspect. Right now, we've all been talking about absorbing nutrients, absorbing your amino acids, your minerals, your vitamins. But look at a single villi. It has an artery and a vein. You know what that means? It's not about absorption, not only or solely about absorption. Half of that is dedicated to absorption. The other half of it is dedicated to detoxification. All of the waste coming from our livers and our kidneys and our tissues and our blood cells and our lymphatic system is designed to be moved through our blood work into our intestinal system, where it gets dumped, joins part of our fecal matter, and is eliminated out of our system. How do we do that? How do we eliminate out of this when it's covered in cheese and dairy and flour and donuts and you name it? And the villi are also damaged that they can't really expel toxicity. An analogy is like putting a rubber glove over top of your detoxification and expecting your body to somehow figure out a way to move those toxins through that rubber glove, which is an impenetrable barrier. See, what's happening to our intestinal systems is that mucus and stuff that forms on there, it becomes called mucoid plaquing. If you guys have strong stomachs, go ahead and Google that. Mucoid plaquing. Just forewarned, you will see like black mucus long ropes that people eliminate out of their intestinal system. This mucoid plaquing are layers, and some of us have multiple layers of mucoid plaquing that is acting like a rubber glove, preventing the absorption of a lot of our nutrition, as well as preventing the expelling of toxins out of our system. And as we move forward in this presentation, I'm going to show you how the expelling of toxins is probably far more dangerous than missing the nutrients. These are some actual barium x-rays of people's large intestines, bowels. Is this crazy? 1 out of 3 North Americans are suffering from some type of gastrointestinal disorder. And if you're over the age of 50, that number actually drops down to 1 in 2. So 50% of you over the age of 50 are experiencing gastrointestinal disorders. In a published report in the early 1990s, the magazine was USA alone, over $400 million was being spent annually on laxatives, and approximately 100,000 colostomy surgeries are performed every year. For any of you that are not familiar with the colostomy surgery is when they take your intestinal system, that they cut it and attach it to a bag on the outside of your intestinal system. So basically you defecate into this bag all day long, and you have to manually change these bags. Not a fun situation to be in, I promise you. What this is telling us is North Americans have a bowel problem. If in the 1990s we're spending $400 million, in 2020 it's probably billions of dollars on laxatives. You guys know who this guy is? Chatty says it's the #1 emergency complaint. I bet it is. I can totally see that. This is the famous Dr. Harvey Kellogg. So he lived in Battle Creek, Michigan. In the 1860s, he had this to say: of the 22,000 operations I've personally performed, I never found a single normal colon. And the 100,000 performed under my jurisdiction, not over 6% of them were normal. This was before McDonald's, Taco Bell, KFC, Burger King, and microwaved processed dinners. What do you think the state of intestinal systems say at this point? I don't think anybody would find what they consider a healthy intestinal system. Not with the food supply that most of us are eating. See, when I went to school, they didn't teach me about my bowel movements. My parents didn't talk to me about my bowel movements. Even my doctor didn't want to have discussions about what my bowel movements should look like or smell like or be shaped like. Whenever I tried to talk about poop, people seemed to run away, at least in the early parts of my life. My later teen years, after my whole family got involved in this aspect, bowel movements and eliminations became daily conversations. We would hold this around dinner tables, and I swear all my friends thought of us as like the weird poopy people that always wanted to talk about poop. But I think it's really important that you and I and your friends know what to look for. So let's talk about it. What should stool be shaped like, look like, smell like, feel like, float like, you name it? Well, first of all, should be 2/3 the size of your wrist in circumference. So let's use my wrist for an example. 2/3 the size of my wrist. So if I just take, see if you guys can see this, my thumb and my pinky, I can just barely touch that around my wrist. So that would be full. 2/3 would be about that size. Let's see, my first knuckle, right around, see if I can get that angled at the camera properly. 2/3 the size of the wrist in circumference. So how thick it should be. Second of all, the length between the wrist and your elbow. First of all, when you look at that, that looks really big, right? But if you were to take your thumb and your pinky, you can see that's the same distance. So as far as you can stretch your thumb and your pinky out, that's what the length that a healthy stool should look like. It should be a solid consistency, which means it shouldn't have the Rocky Mountains and the Grand Canyons in your stool. It should be the same shape start to finish. It should be a light brown color in most cases. Now, color can fluctuate depending on what you're eating. You eat a whole bunch of beets, it'll likely be redder. If you eat a whole bunch of green juices and green salads, it'll likely be greener. But you should be extra concerned if you're seeing white stool, gray stool, or if you see blue stool, see a doctor immediately. Okay? Blue stools are not something to mess around with. Don't try to deal with that at home by yourself. Go see a physician or a medical doctor right away if you have like a gray-blue stool. It should be soft yet formed. Right? When you flush the toilet, it should basically fall apart or get pulled apart. It should not clunk into the toilet bowl and ding off the side like a massive solid rock. It should not smell very bad. People are like, what do you mean? Stools always stink. Well, do they? Any moms on this webinar, remember when you were solely breastfeeding, if you just solely nursed? When my wife was nursing, the stool really didn't have much of an odor at all. It was like an odorless mustard stain in the diapers. And they were easy and a pleasure to change. It wasn't until that child started eating processed or heated cooked foods that diaper all of a sudden started to reek. And you'll find out in the following slides why. So a healthy bowel movement, if you want to see like not smelling stools, start taking 2 to 3 capsules of Avena's proteolytic probiotic with every meal, and I promise you, you will notice a major change in the odor of your stools. It shouldn't leave very much on the tissue, right? If you have to empty half that roll of toilet paper and plug the toilet to clean, something's wrong, right? You should almost not hardly have to wipe, and there shouldn't be very much on the tissue at all. The most important that I capitalized here for us is 1 for every meal that you eat. One for every meal that you eat. Can you guys believe that? Think about it. You remember that picture we saw the intestinal system? Food enters your intestinal system, and the intestinal system starts moving it. And it continues this journey of pressure through peristalsis, start to finish. So breakfast should be really close to my rectum. Lunch should be halfway through, and dinner just starting its journey. So if I'm having healthy bowel movements and healthy peristalsis, I should see breakfast come out, I should see lunch come out, and I should see dinner come out. This is not a system where it works on like advanced efficiency and says, hey, guess what? Let's just wait till he eats 3 meals. We'll process it all together and we'll eliminate it as one big meal bowel movement. No, something is going wrong if your supper is catching up to your breakfast and you're eliminating 1 bowel movement per day. You know, I've got a brand new niece that's only like a few months old, and we were talking about how many times she poops, like 4 to 5 times a day. And they're like, that's way too many. I'm like, no, absolutely not. How many times does she breastfeed per day? Like 5 or 6, 7 maybe even more. Having 4 or 5 bowel movements when you're consuming something as rich and as pure as, you know, breast milk does not seem crazy to me at all. Or let me get control of my slide here again. The question here is, what is happening to what you're not eliminating? If you're having 3 or 4 meals per day, but you're eliminating once every 3 days, ask yourself this very important question. What is happening to all the food you're not eliminating? I'm going to show you. These are more recent x-rays. Notice how the ascending colon, so like the left side of the picture or the right side of our bodies, are always swollen, because this is where undigested food is hard to move up against gravity, especially in jobs like what I'm sitting here at a desk, sitting, squishing that abdominal over. It's a constant, continual problem, and it is what we call bowel toxemia. Bowel toxemia is a state of autointoxication where undigested food is rancidifying, fermenting, and putrefying in your gut and poisoning you slowly from the inside out. It is a very real problem, even though many of my medical friends refuse to acknowledge that it exists. Look it up. You guys already, some of you guys may have Googled that mucoid plaquing. Kudos to you guys for being brave. While you're at it, the next thing you should Google is mega toxic colons. Mega toxic colons. You'll see colons thicker than my entire hand. There are pictures of people with intestinal systems swollen to the size of basketballs. And yet nobody thinks that bowel toxemia is a real problem. In fact, 1 of every 3 adults is suffering from bowel toxemia right now. If you're having less than 3 bowel movements per day, then you are dealing with bowel toxemia on some level. It might be mild, moderate, or severe. So what happens? How are we creating bowel toxemia? What's the bigger picture here? Walk us through this, Cam. Well, there's a very special relationship between essential amino acids. These ones are 5 that I'm going to talk about: tryptophan, methionine, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and then in the center there, because there's a special relationship, lysine. I'm going to get a little technical for just a couple minutes. Don't ditch the call, don't jump off. You're not expected to memorize most of this, but it's important. John J. Miller had this to say: if food is even a little low in lysine, it can make the other 7 essential amino acids practically worthless. The other 7 amino acids are, of course, also important and essential, but a considerable decline in their availability would not lead to such a massive loss of protein, compared to a small deficiency in lysine would be disastrous. Lysine may become unavailable due to conditions of relatively mild heat, which leads to the destruction of lysine. And since lysine is a limiting amino acid of proteins, the vulnerability of lysine to heat leads to a serious impairment of the quality of protein. So what this is telling us, if we cook any of our protein, then we are going to be so damaged that we cannot access many of these amino acids. We can destroy up to 42% of the quality of protein by cooking it. How much of your meat sources can you guys safely eat raw? Very few. But how many of your plant-based proteins is safe to eat raw? Almost all of them. Keep that in mind. This is the single most important fact that you need to take away from this webinar, is cooking your food is destroying the availability of 42% of the amino acids. And it all came back to lysine. These are the essential amino acids controlled by lysine. So if you damage lysine by cooking it or heating it, you destroy access to all of these amino acids. And these amino acids are the building blocks of life. This is what's needed as a macronutrient to create health, to fight disease, and to keep us healthy. And they're called essential amino acids because they must be obtained from your food. Your body has no functionality to produce these amino acids from nothing or from anything. You have to have them present in your food, and they have to come with lysine that isn't been cooked or heated. Remember one of those amino acids, tryptophan? Well, let's look at what happens to tryptophan when it doesn't get absorbed. Because you cooked lysine, you had a piece of meat or an egg or chicken or fish or whatever it was, and it was cooked. We can even extend that to beans, lentils, seeds, plant-based proteins, whatever you weigh, your whey protein powders, they're all cooked, they're all pasteurized. So tryptophan can't be absorbed. And tryptophan is then going to putrefy into indole, skatol, putrescine, histamine, cadaverine. Indole skatol is known to cause the smell or the odor of your feces. Skatol also affects your nervous system. Putrescine can cause low and high blood pressure problems. Histamine, well, we all know histamine causes allergy reactions. And when we poison ourselves with histamine, it's no wonder our bodies can't handle any environmental histamines. What about cadaverine? You guys know what a cadaver is? A cadaver is a dead human body. They're naming a toxin called cadaverine after tryptophan because it is so toxic that in high enough levels, it is incredibly poisonous to the human body. If we look at one more amino acid, tyrosine, it converts into phenol, also known as carbolic acid. Carbolic acid is so toxic that it's used as an antimicrobial screening agent. And then tyramine. Tyramine causes a drop in hormones such as dopamine, which is associated with a lot of palsy kind of diseases like Lou Gehrig's disease or Parkinson's or Parkinsonisms, multiple system atrophies. And so all of these toxins that are being produced in your intestinal system are reabsorbed into your bloodstream, and then your liver is trying to deal with them. Your liver can only do so much work, and there's no more. Your liver is always carrying an unusual burden, especially during bowel toxemia, where naturally the breaking point will now and then be reached. Imagine something like this little cup. Imagine with me for a second that this is what your liver's capacity is. You can put as many toxins as you want. As long as it fits in that cup, your body will neutralize it, deal with it, and it will not be toxic for you. But what is happening is we are trying to dump all of this into this little cup. You thought that lid was open, didn't you? And you know what happens? It all overfills. And all that toxic material that can't fit in the liver bypasses the liver and gets a straight access into our organs, our tissues, our glands. And that is going to cause massive stress and toxicity in our bodies. In fact, these toxins manifest as these type of symptoms: allergies, asthma, arthritis, cardiac arrhythmias, ear, nose, and throat problems, eclampsia, eyesight disorders, thyroid diseases, nervous system disorders, senility, low back pain, and sciatica. All of you men and ladies suffering with sciatica pain, mental sluggishness, dullness, loss of memory, concentration, irritability, lack of confidences, depression, hypochondrias, phobias, delusions, breath pathologies, and even can manifest as cancers. These 7 toxins, commonly found in the colon, even in small quantities, have been known to be responsible and what many people believe is the underlying cause of an exceptionally large group of diseases. And this isn't a complete list. This is the short list. It goes on and on and on to cover close to 100,000 different symptoms that we call diseases. In fact, there's this study called Evidence for Intestinal Toxemia, an inescapable clinical phenomena. If you guys click on files on the right, you'll see it, and you can download it and you can view it. It's a PDF. It's also available on our website. And I'm just going to move through this quickly here because I'm running out of time. But intestinal toxemia, I'm going to talk about the highlighted parts. First of all, I shared this earlier, that after 25-year study, doctors believe that it is universally conceded that these toxins are responsible for an exceptionally large group of diseases, and that intestinal toxemia is a process resulting from a certain type of lifestyle. It's important to note here that the liver can only do so much work and no more. We already talked about this. The liver is limited on how much toxins it can eliminate. And so when toxins are present in too great of a numbers, they're going to manifest and cause disease. Here's an important note that such toxemia is the root of more problems than commonly imagined. It is the root of many conditions, far more than might even be suspected. Generally, intestinal toxemia manifests as this list, which was on the previous slide. And it goes on and on. But let's look at just a few of these in more detail. First of all, allergies. Dr. Lintz successfully treated 472 patients suffering from gastrointestinal allergies, which was a condition of hypersensitivity of the digestive tract, by eliminating the following allergens from the gastrointestinal tract: the bacteria, their toxins, their food, and their byproducts. The most frequent symptoms were endocrine gland disorders of many types, such as hypo and hyperthyroidism, pituitary malfunction, heart disease, hypertension, and many others. Allergies, guys. Almost all allergies that I work with are caused by toxins coming from our intestinal system. Asthma. This doctor in Tulane University reported 121 cases of bronchial asthma were completely successfully treated and relieved by eliminating intestinal toxemia, which was universally present. In other words, every single asthma patient that he saw was also struggling with and had intestinal toxemia. Then after 23 years of observation, the belief that toxemia of the gastrointestinal tract is the underlying and cause behind asthma, he says, I believe my results of treatment justify my position. So for 23 years, he successfully continued to treat asthma as a bowel problem. And he had some of the best success out of any of them. What about arthritis? Dr. Bassler treated 44 arthritic patients by relieving intestinal toxemia. He saw marked improvements in 21 of those 44, moderate in 19, and no improvements in only 4 cases. With the addition of physical exercise, all but 9 cases now showed marked improvements. 20 years later, same doctor said a similar handy of an additional 300 cases has not modified his position, and his position being that arthritis is caused by bowel toxemia. See, my grandmother used to love the sewing arts, the crochet, the knitting, the embroidery. I don't even know all of them, but she loved all of them. She developed arthritis so bad in her fingers and her hands that it was now painful to do what she loved. And she had to give it up. And she lost the joy in her life. She lost her purpose. And she'd sit around bored and not loving life. All we did was introduce the herb cocktail to her, one product that was designed to help address bowel toxemia. It is the single best and most powerful product in the entire world for bowel toxemia. And within 3 months, all the arthritis in my grandmother's hands were gone. Completely gone. Not improved, gone. You should have seen the dining room table doily that she knitted for me. I think it's knitted. And even sewing arts, I might be getting it all wrong. But whatever you do to make a doily, it was like big enough to cover a 12-foot dining room table because she was that ecstatic and happy about it. Dr. Lane, the bottom half of this slide, believed that arthritis could not even develop in the absence of intestinal toxemia. And he stated there's both clinical and X-ray evidence of stasis in all patients. Then he went on to say that symptoms disappear and patients recover, sometimes at rapid rates, when that condition of stasis has been effectively dealt with. Other doctors confirm that connection between intestinal toxemia and arthritis. Cardiac arrhythmias. Toxic conditions of the heart can cause arrhythmias. Dr. Bassler reports 100% success in eliminating such heart irregularities in 43 patients treated during intestinal toxemia. There's a few things I love about this. Is 100% success, so there wasn't not 99. There wasn't a small amount of people that didn't work for. It worked for every single person. Second of all, he didn't even get rid of all the toxins. He simply states he reduced intestinal toxemia. He says, then there's little doubt that there are chemicals coming from the intestinal system that are damaging the heart muscle and the nerves. And these toxins are both formed in the small and large intestine. There's also ear, nose, and throat problems, eclampsia, thyroid gland disease, senility, low back pain, sciatica. Here's one I want to draw attention to because it's such a pressing issue today, especially in our younger population. 518 cases of mental symptoms, including mental sluggishness, dullness, stupidity, lack of concentration, lack of memory, mental incoordination, irritability, lack of confidences, excessive useless worry, exaggerated introspection, hypochondrias, phobias, depression, melancholy, obsessions, delusions, hallucinations, suicidal tendencies, delirium, and stupor. Their success in eliminating these symptoms, see, even back then they're calling these symptoms, as where now depression is a disease, suicidal tendencies is a disease, hypochondria is a disease, but they're not. Even back when this paper was written, they were called symptoms. By surgically relieving intestinal toxemia is truly remarkable in light of today's commonly held beliefs. What are today's commonly held beliefs? Well, they are that your intestinal system and the food you're eating has no relationship to your state of mental health. Bonnie, how often did my grandmother take the herb cocktail? She used 1 teaspoon, 1 rounded, generous teaspoon, and 6 ounces of orange juice twice per day for 3 months. Well, she continued to do it afterwards, but that's basically how long it took before we noticed the marked improvements. So, breast pathologies, cancers, all this information is in that report. You should read their whole report in its entirety, or even just go through and do some of the highlighted sections that I've had to skip. But what is the overall consensus of this report? It comes down to the treatment of intestinal toxemia. He goes to show that various measures have been used. These include surgical removal of the inflamed, ulcerated, or infected intestine. Sometimes they include removing the entire colon altogether. Some people use vaccines to kill the bacteria and the production of toxins. Colonics and laxatives have obviously been used for obvious reasons. Diet therapy and exercise have also been used. Different doctors have used various measures. Some put great emphasis on diet and exercise or elimination. Others put great emphasis on vaccines. Almost all of them have used some type of diet therapy and exercise, have almost always been recommended. In the light of the axiom, physicians should do no harm. First, if vaccines and surgeries can be avoided by the use of a less traumatic and less side effect producing therapy, which are at least equally effective, then vaccines and surgeries should not be used. He goes on to say, this doesn't mean that drugs and surgical therapies are never needed. However, these therapies are actually almost never needed. Very rarely are they absolutely required. Second of all, any therapeutic measure that provides only relief of the symptoms is going to be inferior to a measure that removes the cause of the symptoms. Symptomatic relief is temporary, whereas removal of the cause leads to permanent relief. These concepts are probably self-evident and surely constitute common sense. I'm sure there's no chiropractor or physician would argue this general overview of treatment. And since majority of physicians found success in the use of diet therapy and exercise, these measures should be emphasized. Diet therapy is non-traumatic, does not produce any side effects, and removes the cause, removes the cause of toxemia. It allows for a complete cure to take place, which lasts as long as that lifestyle is followed. Then Dr. Satterley stated, diet and proper emptying of the bowels have always been the recognized treatment. What? When was the last time you went to your doctor for asthma or cardiac arrhythmias or high and low blood pressures or allergies and was told that exercise and proper emptying of your bowels is the treatment for these diseases? I've never heard of it. Not anymore anyways. This doctor, he felt that was commonplace, that him and all his physicians often talked about the elimination of intestinal toxemia. Treatments can be summarized by this. Patients must be taught how to eat, how to live, how to work, and how to play. must be impressed upon them that health will not return through the simple act of taking medication from a bottle. If I were to take this last hour and try to sum it up into this would be my answer. All of the diseases are caused by a certain type of diet and lifestyle that is leading to bowel toxemia, which is then poisoning us from the inside out. This high level of toxicity is the primary reason for premature degeneration. And by premature degeneration, the fact is that we are fighting diseases that have never affected our youth before. Diseases that used to take 70 or 80 years to manifest are now manifesting in our young adults, our middle-aged, and our even preteens. Like arthritis can happen in preteens. It happens in like elementary and grade schools, which is crazy. So now you realize that you and I and most of us are probably fighting bowel toxemia on some state, because we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. None of us are perfect. And there are foods getting into our bodies that are being cooked and or processed or full of chemicals, additives that are designed to create bowel toxemia. What do? Well, we're going to walk through this. First of all, herb cocktail. Take 1 teaspoon twice per day. The first week might be a little rough. You might have cramping, discomfort, fatigue, headaches, loose stools. This is all normal. Go through it. Do 10 days of this. Things will get better. Once you get over that first detox crisis, you can continue to detox comfortably every single day. This cleanses the small and large intestine. It's not a laxative. It's not a stimulant. It pulls toxins from every tissue in your body into the intestinal system for elimination. It forms into this gel. This gel is truly cool because it sucks and pulls everything into it, encourages peristalsis. So it is rebuilding the proper functioning of your bowel at the same time that it's eliminating 3 to 4 times as many toxins as just eating a clean diet itself. It's safe for all ages. Any kid eating solid food can use small amounts of the herb cocktail. Simply just use body weight equivalents. So like a 50-pound child, male, would use a quarter of the dosage of a 200-pound male would. All right. The powder is far more effective. You get twice as much in the powder as you do the capsules. You also get 20% more effectiveness in the powder. So the powder kind of tastes like a bitter, textured peppermint. So the bitter peppermint and the texture can turn some people off. But if you think about how much better it works and how much money you're saving in the powder, it is definitely the best way to go. Second of all, cultured enzymes. Remember how we talked about the food not liquefying properly? Enzymes will help you liquefy your food. If you ever want to see this happen, if you ever want to see this happen, just take like oatmeal and watch how simply adding oatmeal into room temperature cooked oatmeal liquefies that entire oatmeal into a liquid again. That's what's supposed to happen with every one of your meals. Then the intestinal system functions better. The detox and the absorption functions better. The whole process functions better. Try taking a minimum of 3 capsules with every meal for 30 days and watch the improvement in your digestive system. This cleanses, detoxifies, flushes organs, restores, rebuilds, and balances your organs. It's required for every action. And the following weeks here, we'll be doing a webinar all about enzymes. You're going to understand how complex and how powerful these enzymes really are. But let's, today, for this discussion, talk about proper digestion. And for that, minimum of 3 capsules, ideally 5 capsules every meal for the next 30 days. Remember how we talked about these bad amino acids putrefying with bad proteins? Proteins. Let's start that over. Amino acids putrefying with bad probiotics. I'm switching up my words here. Bad bacteria. Bad bacteria putrefies protein, rancidifies fats, and ferments carbohydrates. If we bring in a proteolytic probiotic, which is a unique type of probiotic, it can stop that putrefaction, that rancidification, and that fermentation process. By doing that, you're not going to produce the indole, the skatol, the putrescine, the cadaverine, the tyramine, all these toxins that were so toxic and causing all those different diseases, we can stop producing them by constantly having a proteolytic type probiotic. Try taking 4 capsules before bed and then take 1 or 2 capsules with every meal. I referenced this earlier. If you want to notice how your bowel movements smell better, simply take a probiotic with every single meal. These are antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial, antiviral, antiretroviral, even antitumoral. They're naturally occurring. They contain no maltodextrin, no dairy, no soy, no genetically modified. It is the cleanest, healthiest probiotic on the market, but not just cleanest, healthiest. It is special and unique because it is proteolytic. E-fusion will help restore the life of your intestinal system. All those villi that have been damaged by glyphosates, by toxins, by foods and inflammation, E-fusion will bring that back. It cleanses and restores your liver function, improves with ADD, ADHD, ODD. Wonderful if you're fighting hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. It's fantastic if you're type 1 or type 2 diabetic, or if you have any of the inflammatory bowel diseases like IBS, Crohn's, colitis, ulcerative colitis, diverticulitis. Try taking 3 tablespoons twice per day with your meals. You can even bump that up to double that. Raw plant-based proteins. We talked about how we want to eat more raw and fresh sources of protein. Here is a convenient, wonderful solution. You can have 100% raw, unbinded proteins. Contains 3 ingredients: sprouted yellow peas, hemp seeds, and goji berries. It is a health-focused protein. Each serving gives you 21 grams. It also contains enzymes and probiotics, so you don't need to add enzymes and probiotics to your RP3 shake. It is the most bioavailable type of protein I've ever worked with. This is going to build high-quality, dense muscles and help you restore connective tissues across your entire body. It is the #1 used performance-based, plant-based protein among Olympic athletes and professional athletes. Typically, you won't experience the bloating, discomfort that you normally get with dairy, like a whey-based protein. Try 2 servings per day. So that'd be 2 scoops 2 times a day. You will notice the difference. It comes in a raw chocolate or an unnatural flavor. All right, guys, well, 7 minutes over. But think about this. If nothing changes, then nothing changes, right? You guys have to be prepared to make some changes, whether that's in your lifestyle or your diet or what you're going to eat and what you're going to do. But if you're not willing to change, then don't expect any changes. Think about what health you really want and then move in that direction for it. So, fun experience. If you guys have never done the spin the wheel for a discount, that's active right now on Avena's website. I'm just going to share it here so you can see it. Under offers on the side there, you can click the blue button that says spin wheel. It'll take you to the website. Pop-out should slide out right away within a few seconds. Type in your email address and click the button that says try your luck. The wheel will then spin and you have a chance to win all kinds of different prizes, from discounts to percentages off to free shipping. It'll come up and it'll give you a code. It'll say like save 10 or save 5, whatever code it gives you, that's the code your account is going to be able to use at the checkout to receive that discount. These codes are good for 24 hours, so you have until tomorrow at this time to use those codes up and place your orders. It's a fun feature. I think the best prize there is 20% off your entire order. These percentages off do not work on non-Avena products like rebounders or dehydrators or juicers, things like that, or books, but they will work on any Avena labeled product. Again, the file for that study, the study was called Bowel Toxemia, an Inescapable Phenomena. You can find that under Files. Now I'm just going to jump back on the chat here, and I'm going to try to answer any questions we have so that I can let those that need to go. All right, so what did we first have? Lorraine, love these slides and wish they were on the replays. These slides should absolutely be on the replay. What you see on the screen is identical to what the replay is designed to be. So when you click the replay, it'll be a video and you'll watch start to finish. Me, my face, the slides, everything should be there. If not, give us a call on content or try watching that replay on a different device. It might be a compatibility issue with your device. Cynthia, an extended stomach is not just fat? Absolutely not. Watch what fat does. Fat is soft, it's legs, it hangs over the waistline, it hangs over the belt, it jiggles, it flops around, it's loose and flabby skin. Extended stomachs are often hard, right? Like you can bang on them and they don't even really jingle. That's not fat. That is an intestinal system that's supposed to be this big to this big to this big. And that's putting an enormous amount of pressure forward. And that's where you get a huge amount of extended stomach. Lydia's talking about cold sores. Yeah, the herpes virus. There's arginine is this amino acid that is the essential amino acid for our systems, but it is also the amino acid that herpes or cold sores thrive on. And so there's a balance between arginine and lysine. If lysine levels are low and arginine is high, cold sores thrive. But if you flip that and our lysine levels are over top of arginine, cold sores will die. And so if you are, any of you guys out there struggling with it, increase your lysine. More lysine in your food, but it has to come from raw sources. That's the important part. More raw lysine will greatly improve not only the cold sores, but your absorption of all the other essential amino acids. Bonnie, I think I answered your question. How many and how often did my grandmother take of the herb cocktail? She used 1 rounded teaspoon 2 times per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, every day for 3 months. And all her arthritis was gone. And Bonnie, you're also asking if I can send you this PDF. Simply click on Files on the right-hand side there and download the PDF, and you'll have it on your computer. It's then a digital document that you can send to any of your friends, family members, doctors, whoever you want. It's not something that I made up. This is publicly available. It's called bowel toxemia, an inescapable phenomena. Actually, I think it's intestinal toxemia, an inescapable phenomena. And it was a white paper, compilation of over 165 different major medical center reports. On the last 2 pages, all the references to the actual studies. Are there any cases, so Sonia is asking, are there any cases when a person should not use the herb cocktail? So the recommendations are, if you are like in a state of like chronic constipation where you haven't had a bowel movement for weeks, the herb cocktail is just going to fill up as a gel and it's going to put pressure against that, and that's just going to make you feel even more bloated and more swollen and sore. So don't use the herb cocktail if you are like chronic constipated. Like if you're still having a bowel movement every day, you're totally okay. But if you haven't had a bowel movement in like a month, don't use the herb cocktail. You need something more like a stimulant. You need to deal with that chronic blockage before you can take the herb cocktail. But you should then start using the herb cocktail as soon as that blockage has been dealt with. The other aspect is we don't recommend pregnant mothers detoxify. So the herb cocktail is going to be pulling toxins out of your organs, tissues, and glands. And if you're pregnant, that fetus is going to absorb a lot of that toxins. So let's minimize the exposure of toxins for a pregnant mother. Ideally, I'd love that if a mother could plan conception and focus on detoxification and cleansing and dealing with all this before she conceives, so that she's got the cleanest intestinal system to deal with that pregnancy. That is going to reduce her chance of miscarry by a lot. It's also going to greatly improve the health of the baby. Lorraine says the presentation, so the webinar is called How We Create Disease. The research, the study that I was referencing is intestinal toxemia, an inescapable clinical phenomena. Carmia, my uncle has bad sores in his mouth and doctor says he has to live with it. Of course the doctor says he has to live with it because he doesn't know how to deal with it. But a probiotic, an enzyme, and intestinal cleansing, that body knows how to deal with it. All we need to do is allow that body to focus on healing. Right now, it's focusing on just keeping him alive. If we can change that state, those sores in his mouth will heal. I promise you that. Dario is asking if the super digestive enzyme is okay to use. Absolutely. It's just a super strong version of the enhanced digestive enzyme. So it's a more expensive version, but it's going to do just as great of a job, if not better. Thank you guys for the compliments on a good presentation. Thank you for being part of this. Gloria, yes, the questions and answers are included in the replay, the whole thing start to finish. Fortunately, on the replay, you can't ask any new questions though, because nobody's there to really answer them. You're just watching you're watching tonight's presentation recorded. So guys, just talk about this offer again. It's a spin the wheel. When you spin that, type in your email address, click try my luck. The wheel will spin. It'll randomly land on a prize or no prize. Whatever prize you land on, a pop-up will appear on your screen and it'll give you a code. The code it's English code, so it's going to be like save today this or something. I think it's like save 5 if you win the save 5% off. And that's going to give you that discount on your order. And that spin the wheel is active till 9 p.m. tonight. So you have less than 2 hours to visit the website and get that code. If you've missed the spin the wheel, you have to wait until we do it again. Once you get that code then can be kept and saved until tomorrow at 7 p.m. is when it expires. So make sure you use it up before then. If you enjoyed this information, thank you for letting me know. If there are other people that you think can really value from this information, please pass this information along to them. You'll receive a replay link in just a couple hours. That replay link doesn't expire, so you can share that, post it on your social media, send it, email it to your friends and family members. They'll be able to watch this presentation. If they understand that most of their disease and problems are starting from toxins in their intestinal system, that will allow them to start making changes in their lifestyle to improve that situation. And if you can improve it enough, you can actually get out of that survival mode into recovery mode. And once you're there, the body will cure any disease that it has, because it'll continue to be healthier and healthier every single day, and you can't be healthy and sick at the same time. So focus on driving your health up, and all your disease and sickness will disappear as you go. Even the really hard ones, even the ones that I don't think are possible. I don't have time to get into them tonight, but pretty much any disease that you can think of, I've seen people heal from, which tells me that this human body is incredible at fighting disease. And your doctor's not going to be able to fight your disease for you. I'm not going to be able to fight your disease for you, but you can. You can empower your body to fight your own disease. And I guarantee you it knows exactly what went wrong to get you to the state that you're in. It also has a roadmap already drawn up on how to get you healthy. Thank you, each and every one of you, for being part of the presentation tonight. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed being here and sharing this information. We do free consultations. You can call me in the office and I can help you with any questions or concerns that you have. My colleagues can also assist you with most of your questions. We can see you in office. We also offer like advanced testing, analysis, and not diagnostic, but exploratory, informational type sessions. One of them is called electrical reflex analysis, where we test over 250,000 different frequencies to find viruses, bacteria, diseases, illnesses that are starting to be present in the body. And with that, we can then tailor and customize a program that is so suited for your exact needs to get you the best results possible for the least investment. So I think that's really worthwhile. You can find those online for electrical reflex analysis or test kits or biotest kits. It's something you simply just need to send us a sample of your hair and fingernail clippings. It's as easy as that. All right, guys, I'm signing off for the night. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening. Stay healthy. Let's start making better choices. And together, let's draw awareness to intestinal toxemia, an inexplicable clinical phenomenon. Good night, everybody.